You're listening to Talkline with Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. Congressman Zeldin joins us. He's running for governor of New York on the Republican line. He's from Long Island. He's represented that community. He also served in Afghanistan. He was a prosecutor, military magistrate. He's lieutenant colonel. So, Lieutenant Colonel Congressman Zeldin, thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Zev. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Did serving in Afghanistan help you prepare for the political battlefield?
So I was actually in Iraq in 2006,
Iraq.
and I'll tell you that in the military, when you deal with some of the petty stuff, you can just deal with it on the spot. You have a rank structure, you have a chain of command. I'll tell you what, in politics, there's a whole lot of nonsense that you just can't easily just smack away the same way that you can inside of a military structure. I will say, though, that the Army values that you learn, that very much helps you for politics. Just understanding and appreciating and living honor and integrity and selfless service, all of the different Army values, the leadership traits. I believe that we need more military veterans serving in government. Right after World War II, it was almost 100%. Just after Vietnam, it was a little over 3/4 of the House of Representatives. And now it's well less than 1 in 5 of our House of Representatives made up of military veterans. We have to get that number up.
So how's the campaign coming along?
Yeah, campaign's going great. We're working hard, taking nothing for granted. These last 5 months or so between now and November 8th are going to go by quickly. Before we get there, we have a June 28th Republican Party primary. I was honored to receive the endorsement of the state Republican Party, of the state Conservative Party, but we have to make sure we get all of our votes out. We've now won 7 consecutive races in purple districts, and that's not just by getting votes of Republicans, but getting votes of Democrats and independents as well to earn their support. And we're working hard to earn the support of New Yorkers right now. And the best way to do that is to show up. So I have been traveling all across this state for 13 months, and we're not going to slow down. We're all in, and our belief is that losing this race is not an option. Winning is the only option.
Well, listen, it's a battleground field, and it can get listen, you took a little heat. I think they said, why did you challenge the ballots of Andrew Giuliani and Bob Estorino? And I know that's part of the political process, but I know you took some heat from that too.
Well, listen, one of them you just mentioned doesn't have a running mate anymore because they submitted too many illegal signatures. So, I mean, that's just part of the process. The other one has his hands full with issues because you're not allowed to forge signatures. But as far as the objections, they were submitted by others. We did our own review internally, and there were a lot of issues with regards to the petitions. There's a 4-way primary that doesn't change the reality that when people go to vote on June 28th, that they will have an opportunity to vote. But yeah, we did our own review, and now we have our lieutenant governor candidate, Allison Esposito. She's my running mate. She's our state's next lieutenant governor, 24 years along a 40-year career in the NYPD. And she retired to be our candidate. She doesn't have a primary because no one submitted enough legal signatures to run against her. You have to follow the rules. It's important that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or whatever your party is, that you follow the law. That's an issue whether we're talking about border security, we're talking about all the crime that we're seeing inside of New York City. Now we're dealing with cashless bail and DAs refusing to enforce the law, and election integrity matters as well.
So here's the question. Primary day is June 28th. People are thinking vacation. As it is, very few people vote in elections. So how do you motivate your base to get out there? Because I suspect as we look at past elections, very few people determine the outcome. So what do we do? How do we excite them? How do you get them out?
Well, Zev, I think it's great that you're bringing this up because a lot of people don't realize that there's a primary on June 28th. And then it's even more confusing this year because there's a primary also on August 23rd. The August 23rd primary is just for the House of Representatives and for the New York State Senate. But on June 28th, there'll be a primary for governor of the state of New York, as well as, depending on where you live, you might see some other primary races on your ballot. But every registered Republican in New York, every registered Democrat in New York will have a primary for governor all throughout the entire state. It is important for us to just keep working hard, meeting people, getting to communities, regardless of whether the county is large or small, to be able to have the rallies and the other events. We're active on social media, and we've been on TV since the beginning of February. We have radio ads and we have digital ads. We have a mail piece that just dropped and more to come there. So it's just so many different ways to communicate. Here we are talking right now. There are people who will be tuning in who may be a registered Republican, maybe they're a registered Democrat, and they didn't realize that there are actually two primaries that are coming up. So it's important for voters to know that there actually is an election. I would say that that's step number one. And it's communicating to our voters to let them know that their vote counts, and it does. I would say that it's not just a right to vote. It's a duty to vote. It's an obligation to vote. And we're going to continue working on communicating that to all of our supporters.
No, it's so important. I urge all my listeners to vote, and voter registration should be a big thing to do. And there are two problems. You have people not registered to vote, people registered and don't vote. And that's something which we have to deal with. I'm not sure if the solution is to make it easier by people can vote on their internet, on their computer, cell phone. I'm not sure, because the problem is when you have that, there's less security than with a paper ballots, but all kinds of shenanigans can go on too. So, but we have to make it more accessible for people. That's certainly that's a challenge, not for you and me at this moment, but overall has to be done.
Yeah, the principle is that we should make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. And there are actually a lot of laws that are currently on the books in New York that are actually stricter than certain red states. So when if you have your candidate, you're involved in a campaign and you care about election integrity, you can have poll watchers there when people vote, poll watchers when ballots are opened. You can closely observe. You could use signature verification if there's an objection. You can submit your objection. A judge will have to decide.
I went to vote the other day, and I took up my voter. I took up my registration, my driver's license. Don't show us your identification. You're not allowed to show your identification when you go vote.
Well, I believe that all 50 states, including New York, should have voter identification. I also believe that we shouldn't allow non-citizen voting. What we're seeing next year in the November 2023 election in New York City is that they will allow what is estimated to be approximately 800,000 non-citizens to vote. The principle, the right, is one person, one vote, a principle and right that belongs to United States citizens only. It's my belief that you dilute that right, you dilute that principle by giving non-citizens the right to vote. And let's have this debate as to what the right policies are for our elections. And we should care about this conversation regardless of whether or not our candidates are coming in first or second.
Big issue you raise is crime. And of course, no bail has certainly exacerbated this whole situation. So what can we do about it? Because this is something which not only the governor can do, it's really more of the state legislator. And they seem to be hell-bent on keeping the status quo.
I support repealing cashless bail. I believe that judges should have discretion to weigh dangerousness and flight risk and past criminal record and seriousness of the offense on all offenses. And I also believe that district attorneys should enforce the law. It is actually written into the New York State Constitution that when a district attorney refuses to enforce the law, that the governor of the state of New York can remove them. I would remove Alvin Bragg. He's the Manhattan district attorney, refusing to enforce laws across the board. Many other laws he wants to treat as lesser offenses. If you think that DA stands for defense attorney instead of district attorney, well, then you shouldn't be the head prosecutor for your county. I also support law enforcement, raised in a law enforcement household. My lieutenant governor candidate I was just telling you about, Allison Esposito, She was Deputy Inspector Commanding Officer of the 70th Precinct in Brooklyn. We support our men and women in blue. And there are many ways to do that. I put on my website at zeldinfornewyork.com/secure our streets a couple of dozen different policy proposals that we believe that will strengthen safety and security in New York. And it is important. I would say for many New Yorkers, they tell me it's the number one issue they care about.
Right. Listen, first time that I found an anti-Semitic incident on the subway was just a couple of days ago, coming back from the Israeli Day Parade on the train platform, crowded. Somebody threw a soda can from across the platform to hit me with it because I was wearing a yarmulke. So, and we're seeing the anti-Semitism, we're seeing the lawlessness that's taking place. So we're speaking with Congressman Lieutenant Colonel Lee Zeldin. He's running for governor of New York on the Republican line. So how do we deal with, I believe that anti-Semitism is also tied into the lawlessness. If you get away with crimes, it makes you feel emboldened to enact on your anti-Semitic tendencies as well.
Yeah, there are many examples of raw, violent, anti-Semitic hate, and it's not just targeting Jews, the hatred that's out there, the violent hatred, but we've seen it with the Asian American community. We've seen it with Sikhs. In another way, it just manifests itself out in Buffalo at Tops Supermarket. We are all stronger in combating the hate that might be afflicting our community when we are standing with other communities also suffering from this hate. We just had 3 different Jewish victims in Brooklyn over the span of about a week, physically assaulted. And we have to identify, confront, and crush anti-Semitism in every form, however we see it, whether we see it on our streets, in our schools, in our politics and government.
How do we do it? What are we supposed to be doing?
Well, for one, you have all of the examples that I just gave. So, for example, you and I are having a conversation about cashless bail. In Riverdale, in 2021, there was a person who was vandalizing a whole bunch of different synagogues. And I remember standing outside of the Jewish Center in Riverdale, one of the synagogues that were targeted. And I said, listen, it was like a Thursday. And I said, listen, this person isn't committing these crimes thinking that he's not going to get caught. He's committing these crimes knowing that if he does get caught, he'll be right back out on the streets. Right. And sure enough, the person 2 days later ends up getting caught and he gets immediately released on cashless bail, even though the judges wanted to hold him. We see it as it relates to district attorneys refusing to enforce the law. You have people with mental health challenges out on the streets, drug and alcohol addiction. Some people view success as putting someone inside of a shelter. For me, I view success as being able to get somebody out of a shelter to be able to live a life not requiring either a life lived on the street or having to live inside of a government-funded shelter.
Mental
and it's education in school, and as you improve the quality of education and attendance and graduation rates, it's people getting involved in local faith-based organizations. There's a long list of ways that we can move society forward in improving the moral compass and not having these ignorant, hate-filled attacks taking place.
You got a lot of work to do, and no question about that. The Jewish community is going to play a role in this coming primary, especially the Orthodox Jewish community. A lot of them are Republicans. So let's talk about your connections to the Jewish community and your outreach.
Well, for one, I'm looking forward to taking office in January as the first Jewish Republican governor of New York. We haven't had one before, and I currently serve as one of 2 Jewish Republican members of Congress. I co-chair the House Republican Israel Caucus. I'm a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I just co-led the anti-Semitism resolution that passed almost unanimously in the House just a little while ago. I also co-wrote the anti-BDS resolution that passed the House of Representatives a couple of years ago, almost unanimously. So it's a long road of building interaction, working together with the Jewish community. I'm someone who believes that there's far more that we should be doing to increase education, to improve education in this state. My mother was a yeshiva teacher in Brooklyn.
Which yeshiva?
So it went out of business a while ago. We're talking about like the early to mid 80s. So, yeah, I have to go back. I have to go back. What's that?
Was it in Borough Park or another area?
No. What was it? Oh, it was in Canarsie.
Canarsie, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of the Jews moved out of Canarsie. A lot of them.
Yeah, it was in Canarsie. It was right next to the cemetery, and I'm trying to remember the name. It was TZA, and I'm trying to remember how the rest of it was spelled, something like that. So, yeah, my grandmother, my mother was a fourth grade elementary school teacher at a yeshiva in Brooklyn, and my great grandfather was somebody who was very active. He raised 3 sons. My grandfather founded the Farmingdale Jewish Center, and my 2 great uncles. One was one of the co-founders of the Jewish Center of the Hamptons. Another one, Stephen S. Wise Temple in Los Angeles. So through the generations, there's just been a strong desire to do our part with a strong connection to the Jewish faith. My daughters just recently had their Benot Mitzvah a couple of years ago. Thank you. And
you said Hebrew school too, right?
Well, I'm sorry?
You went to Hebrew school as well.
I did, yeah. I got my bar mitzvah as well. And actually the same rabbi who gave me my bar mitzvah presided over my daughter's Benot mitzvah. And it was an honor to be part of many different efforts in Congress. But as you get closer to home here, I feel like as you watch this move towards this substantial equivalency test up in Albany is the wrong direction. I'm proudly, unapologetically standing up for our yeshivas and others who understand
tuition tax relief. That's one of the biggest problems. Yeshiva and parochial and Catholic school parents have the same issue. There should be tuition tax relief.
Yeah, we need to promote school choice. I'm grateful for all of our teachers and all of our different types of schools. They're all important. We want all of them to be strong. I believe in educational savings accounts, tax credits for school choice.
They want to regulate yeshivas. That's what the Department of Education.
Yeah. That's what I was just referencing with the substantial equivalency push, which is wrong. I oppose it. I would be stopping it if I was sitting in the governor's office today. Unfortunately, right now, that's not the direction that the state is heading for now, but it'll be a different direction when we get sworn into office.
We have a few moments left. What is your Hebrew name?
Moshe.
Moshe. Okay. We got to call you Moshe. Okay.
Hey, you call me whatever you want.
So here's the toughest question of the interview. You're on the campaign trail now that COVID is pretty much over. You can go to different ethnic events. When you go to Jewish events, what is your favorite Jewish food? I ask every candidate that question.
Oh, listen, I'm going to go old school here, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying it and not getting too fancy. But I love me a good matzo ball right there.
That's a good answer. Yeah,
I'll tell you, if you put 30 different options in front of me, that's where I go. And if I had to come up with a snack that I don't get enough of, I've always been a huge fan of making my charoset sandwiches with my matzah, which the family recipe, they always put a little extra kick in it. Yeah, if you gave me a choice of just one, if you put a matzo ball soup in front of me, I'm going to have a good day.
Terrific. I asked Mayor-elect Eric Adams, will he commit to having a glatt kosher kitchen in Gracie Mansion? He said yes. If elected governor, will there be a glatt kosher kitchen in Albany?
Hey, there you go. That's a great idea, and I look forward to also hosting a Passover Seder at the governor's mansion, and and having a very extensive Jewish outreach. And the last Jewish governor we had, I don't know how much what the tribe is thinking of these days. His last name was Spitzer, and that ended. He wasn't able to complete his term. And I feel like it's going to be a good opportunity for us to get a lot of good things done. The Jewish community needs to be active and engaged. These issues that we care deeply about. It doesn't matter what party you are, Republican, Democrat, Independent, wherever you're from, ideology. We're all in this together. We have to save our state for our streets, our safety, our education, our freedoms, and more. So I'd be very grateful to have everyone's support, to earn everyone's support, and to earn keeping everyone's support.
Before I let you go, now you're a strong supporter of Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. That goes well in the Republican primary, but overall, New York being so Democratic, it works the other way. So do you see that being a liability outside the Republican primary should you win in greater New York?
I don't. As we saw after 2008, we saw Democrats overplay the anti-Bush card. After 2016, Republicans overplayed the Obama card. After 2020, you're seeing Democrats overplay the anti-Trump card. That's what happened in Virginia for sure last November. So while we're talking about reversing the attacks on wallet safety, freedom, and our kids' education, we're running a campaign about saving our state. If the other side just wants to talk about President Trump, I am sure that when we're battling for undecided, independent-minded voters in September and October, we're going to be cleaning up and winning that election by even
However,
more.
the abortion ruling, I think, has energized the Democratic Party. So that could bring out a whole bunch of Democratic voters because that, I think, is a way for them to overcome the high inflation and the low numbers of President Joe Biden.
Yeah, the problem, though, is that in New York State, where they have already codified not just what Roe v. Wade provides, but they've codified it's legal in New York State, late-term partial birth abortions, non-doctors performing abortion. So if the draft opinion became final, as you and I are having this conversation today, the law in New York is exactly the same as it would be the morning after waking up and the
Change in New
draft
York,
opinion
would
is final.
change other part, not in New York, would not change. And
Yeah. And there's some people in New York politics who are trying to, convey to people as if the world's going to end here in New York if that draft opinion becomes final, when in reality, it actually will change absolutely nothing about New York's law.
Congressman Moshe Lee Zeldin, we appreciate you being here. We got to come back more often. Trudy
I look
Stern,
forward to it.
Congressman Lee Zeldin, I says, I'm glad you're able to join us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.